I am Myra Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, currently enduring the grueling hours of a cardiology residency, and I'm navigating life as a single mother to my 3-year-old twins. Exactly 2 months ago, I found myself lying on a stretcher in a trauma bay, suffering from severe internal bleeding following a brutal car crash. With my hands violently trembling, I dialed my parents' phone number. I desperately needed someone, absolutely anyone, to watch my children, Lily and Lucas, for just a couple of hours while trauma surgeons attempted to save my life. Instead of panic or support, I received a text message notification from our family group chat. It was from my mother, and it read, "You have always been such a nuisance and a constant burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. Figure it out yourself." And so, I did exactly that. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, I pulled up a 24-hour emergency nanny service, authorized triple the standard rate to get someone to my house immediately, and made a permanent choice that would alter the trajectory of my entire existence. I financially and emotionally amputated my family. The massive monthly mortgage subsidies, the expensive health insurance premiums, the constant auto repairs, every single expense I had been secretly funding for the last 8 years was instantly cut off. Exactly 14 days later, there was a heavy knock on my front door. Before I reveal exactly who was waiting on my porch and the insane sequence of events that followed, I'd love it if you could hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, but only do so if you're truly captivated by this kind of story. Also, leave a comment down below telling me where in the world you're tuning in from and what the clock says for you right now. I absolutely love reading your responses. Now, let's rewind the clock so you can understand how this toxic dynamic was born. Growing up under the Carver family roof, I was taught very early on that affection was distributed based on a strict hierarchy. My older sister, Vanessa, was the undisputed center of the universe. She was 3 years my senior, naturally stunning, and possessed this undeniable, magnetic aura that made our parents absolutely glow the second she stepped into a room. When she officially declared her intention to pursue a career in fashion design, my mother wept tears of sheer joy. My father proudly labeled her our little creative visionary. When it was my turn, I announced I wanted to go to medical school and become a doctor. My dad gave a brief, indifferent nod and muttered, "Well, that's practical." That was the extent of it. Practical. I constantly lied to myself, pretending their indifference didn't sting. I just buried my face deeper into my anatomy textbooks, crushed every single exam put in front of me, and successfully fought my way into one of the most prestigious medical programs in the nation. I survived 4 grueling years of undergraduate studies, 4 exhausting years of medical school, and 3 sleep-deprived years of a cardiology residency. The afternoon I officially received my medical degree should have been a monumental milestone in my life. My parents showed up exactly 2 hours late to the ceremony. "So sorry, sweetheart," my mom casually apologized, actively avoiding eye contact with me. Vanessa had an unexpected, last-minute pitch meeting with an angel investor. We had to chauffeur her across town first. There were no celebratory bouquets. There was no expensive graduation dinner. I received a hasty, blurry photograph standing in the parking lot before they sprinted back to their car because Vanessa required intense emotional debriefing after her stressful meeting. Let's quickly compare that to Vanessa's very first runway show 3 years prior. My entire family booked flights to New York City. They stayed in a lavish, 5-star boutique hotel and secured front-row seats. My dad uploaded 17 different pictures to his Facebook timeline with fawning captions like, "Bursting with pride for our incredibly talented girl." For becoming a doctor, I got a parking lot snapshot and a deeply unenthusiastic, "Congrats, honey." I rationalized their behavior for years. I told myself that the fashion industry was cutthroat, so naturally, Vanessa required a stronger safety net. The medical field is notoriously stable, so clearly, they just trusted me to handle my own affairs. But what I completely failed to realize back then was that my parents' blatant favoritism wasn't strictly emotional. It was heavily financial, and I was the one quietly underwriting the entire operation. The exploitation officially kicked off 8 years ago, right as I was wrapping up my medical degree. My dad called me late one night, his tone thick with manufactured embarrassment. Myra, your mother and I are in a really tight spot right now. The mortgage is due, and our cash flow is completely frozen this month. Do you think you could possibly bail us out? Just this once. Just this once. I didn't even hesitate. I logged into my banking app and instantly wired them $2,400. They were my parents, after all. Obviously, I was going to help them survive. But just this once seamlessly morphed into a permanent monthly tax. First, it was the $2,400 for the mortgage. Then, when my dad's employer conveniently slashed their benefits, they needed $800 on the 15th of every month to cover their health insurance premiums. Then came the endless parade of manufactured emergencies, blown transmissions, a leaking roof, a busted HVAC unit. I literally never told them no. Not a single time. When I found out I was pregnant with twins and my cowardly partner walked out on me during my 5th month, I experienced a horrifying bleeding complication. I called my parents from the maternity ward. I was completely alone, utterly terrified, and begging for my mother to come sit with me. "Oh, honey, we would absolutely love to be there," my mom sighed into the receiver. "But Vanessa is having a total meltdown after her showcase in Milan. She desperately needs our energy right now." They never showed up. They weren't there when I gave birth. They weren't there during that agonizing first month when I was surviving on 2 hours of sleep, nursing premature newborns, and frantically studying for my medical board exams. But the automated bank transfers? Those never stopped. Every month, $2,400 for the house and $800 for the insurance automatically drained from my account. I actually started maintaining a private Excel spreadsheet. I'm not entirely sure why I did it. Perhaps my logical brain just needed to quantify the abuse in black and white. The final tally was breathtaking. Over the span of 8 years, I had surrendered approximately $320,000 to them. I never demanded a brass band in my honor. I never expected them to worship the ground I walked on. But I certainly never anticipated being labeled a burden by the exact people I had been financially carrying on my back for the better part of a decade. The ultimate reckoning was hurtling toward me. I just couldn't see it coming yet. The collision occurred on a rainy Tuesday evening. I had just wrapped up a brutal 16-hour clinical rotation and was navigating my way home. My eyelids felt like lead, but I was totally coherent. The traffic light shifted to green, and I eased into the intersection. I completely failed to spot the delivery truck. It blew straight through a solid red light traveling at 50 miles per hour. The grille of the truck annihilated my driver's side door. The windows shattered into diamond dust. The grinding of folding metal deafened me. The world aggressively spun like a top, and then absolutely everything faded to black. I eventually regained consciousness in the back of a moving ambulance. A blinding, searing agony was ripping through my abdomen. A highly familiar face was leaning directly over my stretcher. "Myra. Myra, stay with me. Can you hear my voice?" It was Dr. Marcus Smith. He was an attending emergency physician at my specific hospital. We had been working the same floor for over 2 years. "Marcus," I croaked, my voice sounding entirely alien to my own ears. "What is going on?" "You were T-boned in an intersection. We are rushing you to the trauma bay right now. We suspect severe internal bleeding. You are absolutely going to need to go under the knife." "Surgery." The words slammed into my chest harder than the truck did. "My children." I desperately reached up and grabbed his scrub top. "Lily and Lucas. They're at home with the evening sitter. She legally has to clock out at 8 p.m. Marcus quickly glanced at his wrist. "It is currently 7:15. You have 45 minutes. I had exactly 3/4 of an hour to secure a guardian for my toddlers while a surgical team sliced my stomach open. I frantically patted down my pockets with violently shaking hands until I found my phone. Smearing my own blood across the cracked glass, I pulled up my parents' contact info. It rang 4 agonizing times. "Myra," my dad answered, his tone dripping with heavy annoyance. "We are literally walking out the front door. What do you want?" "Dad, I desperately need your help," I wheezed, the words agonizing to push out. "I was in a massive car crash. I am in an ambulance, heading into emergency surgery." Please, I just need you and Mom to drive over and watch the twins for a few hours. Total silence blanketed the phone line. Hold on a second, he muttered. I could hear muffled, agitated voices in the background. My mother's sharp, deeply irritated tone. I could clearly hear Vanessa giggling at something in the same room. Then, the call simply disconnected. A second later, my shattered phone screen illuminated with a text notification from the Carver family group chat. It was a message authored by my mother. Myra, you have always been such a nuisance and a constant burden to this family. We have premium Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. We have been looking forward to this for months. Figure it out yourself. I stared at the screen. I read the text twice, then a third time. The cruel words remained exactly the same. A follow-up text instantly popped up from my dad. You are a literal doctor. You practically live in hospitals. Do not try to blow this out of proportion and make it a bigger deal than it actually is. And then came the final blow from Vanessa. She didn't even bother typing a sentence. She just dropped a single, mocking, laughing, crying emoji into the chat. That was it. That was the entirety of my worth to my bloodline. A cartoon laughing face while I was bleeding to death in the back of a speeding ambulance. Marcus had been silently observing me. I hadn't even registered that he could read my glowing screen until he gently spoke up. Myra, his tone was incredibly soft and cautious. What exactly did they just say to you? I physically couldn't form the words. A massive, tectonic shift had just occurred deep within my soul, and the pain had absolutely nothing to do with my ruptured internal organs. I need to borrow a phone, I whispered weakly. A working phone with a cellular connection. Mine is on 1%. He handed me his personal device without a single second of hesitation. I aggressively Googled premium emergency nanny agencies, located a firm that advertised 24/7 immediate dispatch, and dialed their number. I outlined my horrific situation in clipped, razor-sharp medical terminology. Yes, I would authorize triple the standard hourly rate. Yes, I would provide my current sitter's contact information to facilitate an immediate handoff. Yes, run my credit card right this second. The entire crisis was resolved in 4 flat minutes. Marcus was still intensely staring at me when I handed his smartphone back to him. He didn't offer any empty platitudes. He didn't need to. Can you please screenshot those text messages from my device? I asked him, my voice barely a whisper. Before the battery completely dies? He gave me a slow, solemn nod. Yeah, I can absolutely do that for you. I let my heavy eyelids slide shut as the ambulance aggressively backed into the hospital's emergency bay. The physical agony in my stomach was blinding now, but the deepest, most suffocating pain had completely evaporated. Laying on that gurney, equipped with an 4-line and a shattered heart, I made the easiest, most liberated decision of my entire life. The emergency operation lasted for 4 grueling hours. I had suffered a severely ruptured spleen and massive internal hemorrhaging. The trauma surgeon later informed me that if I had arrived a few minutes later, I likely wouldn't have survived. I was confined to a hospital bed for 5 solid days. 5 days consisting of heavy 4 drips, a thick morphine fog, and nurses interrupting my sleep to check my vitals. Over the course of those 5 days, I did not receive a single phone call from my parents. I didn't get a text message asking if I survived. Nobody came to visit. The emergency nanny service cost an absolute fortune, but they were worth their weight in gold. They perfectly synchronized with my regular sitter, ensured Lily and Lucas were safe and distracted, and texted me adorable photo updates every few hours. Complete, paid strangers demonstrated infinitely more compassion for my family than my actual flesh and blood. On the 3rd afternoon of my recovery, I politely requested that a floor nurse fetch my personal laptop from my belongings. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for screen time? She asked with genuine concern. You really need to be prioritizing your rest. I just have one quick administrative task to handle. My fingers were perfectly steady as I logged into my primary banking portal. There they were, staring right back at me. 8 years of automated leeches. $2,400 scheduled for the 1st of the month. $800 scheduled for the 15th. I permanently canceled every single one of them. Next, I opened my iPhone's contact settings. I permanently blocked my father's cell number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked Vanessa. There was no cinematic, tearful breakdown. I didn't second-guess my actions for a millisecond. It honestly felt like slipping off a 100-pound backpack that I had been carrying for so long. My spine had simply forgotten it was there. Marcus dropped by my room later that evening. He had routinely checked in on me every single day, quietly delivering bad hospital coffee and offering silent, comforting companionship. "How are you holding up today?" he asked, pulling up a chair. I looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time in years, I spoke my absolute truth. Better. For the very first time in 8 long years, I genuinely feel better. He didn't pry for the messy details. He just offered a knowing nod. I was fully aware that a massive fallout was looming on the horizon. My parents would inevitably notice their accounts draining. They would throw massive tantrums, cry victim, and aggressively demand an explanation. But I could never have predicted the specific plot twist that was about to unfold. Exactly 2 weeks post-surgery, I was finally recovering in my own home. I was moving at a glacial pace, my abdomen was still incredibly tender, but I was breathing. It was a bright Saturday morning, and I was busy flipping pancakes for Lily and Lucas, our sacred weekend tradition. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of melting butter and warm maple syrup. Lucas was aggressively attempting to construct a tower out of wooden blocks, while Lily was happily assisting by constantly karate chopping it down. Then it happened. 3 incredibly sharp, authoritative knocks echoed from my front door. I quickly wiped my sticky hands on a dish towel, my resting heart rate instantly spiking. If it was my parents attempting an ambush, I wasn't emotionally prepared to face them. I honestly didn't know if I would ever be prepared to look at them again. I carefully approached the door and peered through the glass peephole. My breath completely caught in my throat. Standing stoically on my welcome mat was a highly imposing man in his late 70s. He sported immaculate silver hair, piercing, analytical blue eyes that I instantly recognized from my childhood, and a rigid posture that still heavily broadcasted the absolute authority of a man who had spent 40 years sitting on a federal judicial bench. It was Grandpa Thomas. I hadn't laid eyes on the man in nearly 3 years. My parents always fed me a rotating carousel of pathetic excuses as to why we couldn't visit him for the holidays. He was too busy, the drive was too inconvenient, or he simply wasn't feeling up to visitors. I slowly pulled the front door open. He immediately stepped inside and wrapped me in a bear hug, so incredibly fierce it made my fresh surgical staples throb. "Myra," his voice was thick with raw emotion. "Let me get a good look at you." He gently pulled back, his sharp eyes intensely scanning my pale face before dropping down to where my forearm was subconsciously guarding my wounded abdomen. "I know absolutely everything," he stated in a hushed, furious tone. "Eleanor told me the whole story." Aunt Eleanor was my mother's younger sister. She had notoriously functioned as the sole rogue element in the Carver family, the only relative who possessed the spine to openly criticize how my parents treated me. "Grandpa, I honestly don't." He immediately held up a massive, calloused hand to silence me. "You do not need to justify or explain a single thing to me, Myra. But I do need you to accompany me somewhere very important." He reached inside the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket and extracted a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was highly elegant and aggressively formal. An invitation. "I am throwing a massive party for my 70th birthday next Saturday evening," he announced. "The entire extended bloodline is going to be in attendance." His piercing blue eyes locked onto mine. "And I have a few specific things that urgently need to be entered into the public record." Grandpa Thomas sat comfortably at my kitchen island, sipping black coffee and watching Lily and Lucas with a remarkably soft smile. The twins had gravitated toward him instantly, dragging out their favorite toys and loudly demanding his undivided attention. He surrendered to them happily. "They share your exact face from when you were their age," he chuckled. "They even inherited that stubborn little chin." I set my own coffee mug down and took the bar stool across from him. "Grandpa, how exactly did you find out about the crash?" "About the entire situation. Eleanor called my personal line the exact night you were admitted." He wrapped his large hands tightly around the ceramic mug. "She had caught wind of the accident through one of your younger cousins. When she subsequently informed me of exactly how your parents reacted." He trailed off, the muscles in his jaw visibly clenching. I have silently observed this toxic dynamic for decades, Myra. I have watched exactly how Helen and Richard worship Vanessa while treating you like an afterthought. I may be an old man, but my vision is perfectly fine. I stared down at the dark liquid in my cup. I honestly gaslit myself into thinking I was just being overly dramatic, that I was inflating the issue. You absolutely were not. His voice carried the crushing, undeniable weight of a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to separating objective truth from convenient fiction. I served as a federal judge for 40 long years. I am a master at reading human behavior. I know exactly what blatant favoritism looks like, and I certainly know what financial exploitation looks like. He leaned across the island, his gaze intense. I need you to confirm something for me right now. Do you still possess the digital receipts of the capital you have been wiring to them? I nodded slowly. Every single bank transfer. I've tracked it for 8 years. Excellent. He leaned back, deeply satisfied. I need you to compile a comprehensive, irrefutable summary. Every single transaction. The specific dates. The exact dollar amounts. Why? Because at my birthday gala, standing in front of every single aunt, uncle, and cousin we have, I fully intend for the unvarnished truth to be dragged into the light. His eyes weren't burning with a desire for petty revenge. They were entirely still and calculating. Because facts, as I have learned from my time on the bench, possess a highly effective way of speaking for themselves. My hands began to violently tremble around my coffee cup. Grandpa, what if the rest of the family hates me for doing this? The relatives who actually matter won't. He reached across the granite and firmly squeezed my shaking hand. And the relatives who do hate you? They never deserved a seat at your table to begin with. The subsequent 2 weeks passed in an absolute blur of administrative preparation. I fired up my home printer and drained an entire ink cartridge, printing out every monthly bank statement, every wire transfer confirmation number, and 8 solid years of detailed financial logs. I organized them in strict chronological order and securely bound them inside a boring, plain manila folder. Looking at the physical manifestation of my abuse all in one place was incredibly nauseating. Month after agonizing month, year after grueling year, it was a massive, one-way river of my hard-earned wealth flowing directly into their pockets. Aunt Eleanor dropped by my apartment 3 days prior to the event. She was 55, notoriously sharp-tongued, and wore her title as the family's black sheep like a badge of honor simply because she refused to participate in my parents' delusions. She silently flipped through the manila folder, her facial expression growing darker and more horrified with every turn of the page. $360,000, she stated, her voice completely flat and devoid of emotion. Myra, do you truly comprehend the magnitude of this? I know. It is significantly more money than most average people earn in 7 years of grinding full-time. She aggressively tossed the folder onto the counter. And these people had the absolute audacity to label you a burden. I pressed the heels of my hands hard against the edge of the kitchen counter. I really don't want to detonate the entire family structure, Aunt Eleanor. I just desperately want them to open their eyes and acknowledge the sacrifices I have made for them. You aren't detonating a damn thing. She walked over and placed a reassuring hand squarely on my shoulder. You are simply pulling the plug on a massive lie. They aggressively funded their luxurious, comfortable reality using your silent compliance as currency. You are under absolutely zero moral obligation to continue subsidizing that fantasy. I gave her a hesitant nod, even though my stomach was aggressively churning with pure anxiety. But what if the extended family blindly takes their side? A few of the delusional ones probably will. Family politics are incredibly messy. She offered a nonchalant shrug. But your grandfather wields an immense amount of social power in this family. And infinitely more important than that, you are holding the objective truth in your hands. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from a distant cousin I hadn't interacted with in months. Hey, I heard through the grapevine that you and your folks had a massive falling out. Vanessa has been telling everyone in the family that you have been acting super erratic and crazy ever since your car crash. Just wanted to give you a friendly heads up. I simply stared at the glowing text bubble. They were already actively deploying a vicious smear campaign. They were proactively painting me as mentally unstable, desperately laying down their defensive perimeter before I even set foot on the property. I had genuinely hoped to avoid an all-out war, but it was glaringly obvious they were bringing heavy artillery. Grandpa Thomas resided in a breathtaking colonial estate situated on 3 acres of perfectly manicured landscaping. The property boasted towering white columns and a massive wraparound porch, the exact aesthetic that quietly screamed old generational wealth and undeniable authority. I slowly rolled into the sprawling circular driveway, my hands gripping the leather steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Lily and Lucas were strapped securely in their car seats behind me, excitedly pointing at the massive architecture and the colorful party balloons bobbing in the front windows. There were easily over 40 vehicles parked along the grass. The entire Carver bloodline had assembled. I stepped out wearing a highly understated, professional navy blue dress. I wasn't arriving to throw a theatrical, screaming tantrum. I was arriving to perform an autopsy on the truth. The manila folder was tucked safely inside my oversized tote bag. Inside the house, the celebration was already operating at maximum capacity. Hard waiters in crisp uniforms navigated the crowd with trays of expensive champagne. A live string quartet was situated in the corner of the grand foyer. Antique crystal and polished silver sparkled under the massive chandelier. I locked onto my targets almost immediately. My parents were holding court near the massive stone fireplace. My dad was looking incredibly distinguished in a tailored suit, while my mom, draped in an elegant cream-colored gown, was throwing her head back, laughing hysterically at a joke someone had just made. They spotted me at the exact same moment. My mother's joyous laugh instantly died in her throat. My father's entire face morphed into a mask of rigid panic. For 5 incredibly long seconds, nobody in the room moved a muscle. And then, Vanessa materialized from the crowd. My older sister effortlessly glided across the hardwood floor wearing a breathtaking designer gown that undoubtedly cost more than my monthly medical school loan payment. Her pageant smile was perfectly plastered to her face, but her eyes were absolute ice. "Oh, Myra." She leaned in and delivered a fake, exaggerated air kiss inches from my cheek. "You actually made it out. We heard all the scary rumors about your little accident. Nothing too horribly serious, I hope." I locked eyes with her and held my ground. I suffered a violently ruptured spleen and massive internal hemorrhaging. I was minutes away from dying on the operating table. Her plastic smile violently twitched. "Oh, well, Mom made it sound like it was just a minor fender bender. Mom wasn't present to see the wreckage." I effortlessly shifted Lucas's weight onto my left hip. "None of you were." Vanessa's flawless composure cracked for a fraction of a second. She quickly recovered her mask, patronizingly patting my shoulder with manufactured sympathy. "Well, you look absolutely fine now. And really, that is all that matters." She quickly pivoted and drifted away into the crowd, but I could already feel the heavy, atmospheric rumble of impending thunder. This was merely the opening skirmish. The coordinated assault commenced exactly 30 minutes into the reception. I was hovering near the refreshment table pouring fruit punch for the twins when I caught the unmistakable sound of Vanessa's voice. It was pitched at a highly deliberate, theatrical volume designed to carry across the room. I am just so incredibly terrified for Myra, to be completely honest. She was holding court with a cluster of impressionable aunts and cousins near the dessert tower. That accident severely messed with her head. She has been spouting the most bizarre, paranoid delusions. She completely severed all contact with Mom and Dad for absolutely no logical reason. I intentionally kept my back to the group, but every single syllable landed between my shoulder blades like a throwing knife. My mother seamlessly joined the performance, dramatically dabbing the corners of her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. We have tried absolutely everything in our power to help her. Endless phone calls, loving texts, she viciously ignores us. I am deeply terrified she is suffering from a massive psychotic breakdown. "Oh, that poor darling," a gullible aunt murmured sympathetically. "Well, you all know she has always been the incredibly sensitive one," Vanessa piled on. "Do you guys remember how insanely dramatic she used to be back in high school? I honestly believe the crushing stress of being a single mother finally caused her to snap. I could literally feel the weight of a dozen eyeballs shifting to stare at me. I could feel the condescending pity, the hushed, gossipy concern. I refused to take the bait. I simply handed Lucas his plastic sippy cup and gently smoothed down Lily's curls. Aunt Eleanor suddenly materialized at my elbow, her voice a low, furious hiss. They have been actively laying this toxic groundwork all damn week, calling every relative in the phone book, aggressively planting seeds of doubt. They know a reckoning is coming, and their strategy is to proactively destroy your credibility before you even open your mouth. I know exactly what they are doing. Are you holding up okay? I briefly glanced across the massive living room. My grandfather was quietly observing the entire theatrical production from a leather armchair. He had a crystal glass of neat whiskey resting in his hand, and his facial expression was completely unreadable. He caught my eye and delivered the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. "I am perfectly fine," I whispered back to Eleanor. "Let them dig their own graves." Suddenly, the ambient noise in the room rapidly died down. Someone loudly clinked a silver spoon against a champagne flute. Grandpa Thomas slowly rose to his feet. Even at 70 years of age, he naturally commanded the exact same terrifying, unshakable authority he wielded as a judge for 4 decades. Every single face in the room eagerly turned to give him their undivided attention. Before we proceed any further with tonight's wonderful festivities, his booming voice carried effortlessly to the back row. "I have a few very specific matters I would like to address." The oxygen in the room seemed to vanish. This was the moment. All right, I absolutely have to hit the pause button right here for just a moment. Before my grandfather unleashes his evidence onto the crowd, I want to ask you a serious question. Have you ever been trapped in a toxic situation where a narcissist actively tried to rewrite history to make you look like the villain? Where they maliciously painted you as the crazy one simply because you finally established a healthy boundary? Please drop a comment and share your personal experience, or just type the word truth if you have survived this specific kind of manipulation. And if you are highly invested in seeing how this blows up, please smash that like button. Trust me, the execution is incredibly satisfying. Now, let's jump back to the party. Before Grandpa could formulate his next sentence, my father aggressively stepped out from the crowd. "Dad, hold on a second." My father's voice sounded remarkably controlled, but I could clearly see a frantic, pulsing vein in his jawline. "Before you give a toast, there is a highly sensitive family matter that I feel everyone in this room needs to be made aware of." Grandpa Thomas slowly raised a single silver eyebrow. "The floor is yours, Richard." My dad physically turned his body to face the massive crowd, perfectly embodying the role of a deeply devastated, heartbroken patriarch. As many of you have likely heard through the grapevine, my youngest daughter Myra has been navigating an incredibly dark and difficult chapter lately. He offered a pathetic, mournful smile in my direction. Ever since she suffered her unfortunate car accident, her mental state has been highly confused and violently distant. She has inexplicably severed all communication with her loving mother and me. My mom immediately rushed to his side, practically crushing her lace handkerchief in her fists. "We have never wanted anything but absolute happiness for her," she wailed, her voice expertly trembling. "But she has been maliciously spreading horrifying lies about our character. She has been telling people that we abandoned her to die and that we don't love her." The grand living room fell completely, utterly silent. I could physically feel 40 pairs of eyes intensely burning a hole through my navy dress. "We have desperately tried to maintain our patience with her illness," my dad continued, pressing his advantage. "But it has completely shattered our hearts. We sacrificed everything to give that girl the world. Absolutely everything. Vanessa naturally had to steal the spotlight to add her own venom. She has even been aggressively claiming that we actively refused to assist her during her medical emergency, which is a complete, fabricated delusion. There obviously must be some sort of tragic cognitive misunderstanding happening in her brain." An older relative standing a few feet away from me let out a loud, highly sympathetic sigh. "Oh, those poor parents." I stood completely frozen in place. Lily had nervously buried her tiny face into the crook of my neck, picking up on the incredibly hostile energy radiating through the room. Myra, sweetheart. An elderly aunt I had barely spoken to in 5 years cautiously approached me like I was a feral animal. Is your mind doing okay, honey? Your parents are just so incredibly terrified for your safety. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but my vocal cords felt paralyzed. And then, Grandpa Thomas's booming voice sliced through the suffocating tension like a heavy wooden gavel cracking against a sound block. Are you entirely finished with your opening statement, Richard? The question wasn't screamed. It was delivered with an eerie, terrifying mildness. But every single human being with a pulse in that room heard the lethal, cold steel hiding beneath it. My father's arrogant, confident posture instantly fractured. I just strongly believe the family deserved to know the full context. The family absolutely deserves to know the truth, Grandpa interrupted, his eyes flashing with raw fury. And I fully intend to deliver it to them right now. Grandpa Thomas methodically marched to the absolute center of the grand foyer. His pace was highly measured and deeply deliberate. It was the precise swagger of a man who had presided over hundreds of brutal federal trials and had never once lost command of his jurisdiction. I have patiently listened to your deeply moving concerns, Richard, he began. Helen, Vanessa, you have successfully painted a highly compelling portrait of a deeply disturbed young woman who has maliciously turned against her endlessly supportive family. He allowed a heavy pause to blink at the room. Now it is my turn to cross-examine. My father shifted his weight nervously from foot to foot. Dad, I really do not believe this is the appropriate venue. This is exactly the appropriate venue. Grandpa didn't raise his volume, but his tone became absolute granite. This is a gathering of our bloodline, and a family should intimately know the factual truth about the people sitting at their table. He rotated his body to lock eyes with my father. Richard, I have a very simple, straightforward question for you. Who exactly has been paying the monthly mortgage on your primary residence for the past 8 consecutive years? All of the color instantly drained out of my dad's face, leaving him looking sickly gray. What? Your monthly mortgage. Exactly $2,400, drafted every single month for 8 years. Who is paying that bill? We. My dad's terrified eyes frantically darted over to my mom. We personally pay our own mortgage. Do you? Grandpa Thomas casually reached inside his tailored suit jacket and extracted a thick manila folder. My manila folder. Because I happened to hold in my hands a comprehensive, legally verified record of bank wire transfers originating directly from Myra's personal checking account, deposited directly to your mortgage lender for 96 consecutive months. A collective, horrified murmur aggressively rippled through the crowd of relatives. That is just a massive misunderstanding, my mom began to helplessly stammer. Myra generously offered the cash. We literally never asked her for it. I am absolutely not implying that you held a loaded weapon to her skull, Grandpa replied with terrifying calmness. I am simply establishing the objective facts of the case. He slowly flipped the manila folder open. Let me share some specific mathematics with the rest of the family. I strongly believe they will find the numbers highly illuminating. Across the room, Vanessa looked like she was going to throw up. My dad's hands were violently balled into fists at his sides. My mom looked like she was mere seconds away from passing out on the hardwood floor. And I just stood there, fiercely holding my children tight, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs as the ugly truth finally breached the surface. 8 total years, Grandpa Thomas read aloud from my spreadsheets. Let us break down the exact financial accounting. The room had gone so completely, utterly silent that you could have heard a pin drop on a rug. The hired string quartet had awkwardly frozen in place, their bows hovering over their violins. Mortgage payments, $230,400. He slowly looked up from the paper, staring a hole through my father. That covers the exact house Richard and Helen currently reside in. The specific house they just proudly claimed they pay for themselves. Somebody near the back of the room audibly gasped. Health insurance premiums, $76,800. The very second Richard's employer discontinued their corporate coverage, Myra seamlessly picked up the tab. He flipped to the next page. vehicle transmissions, structural home maintenance, and various manufactured emergency expenses, approximately $45,000. He flipped one final page. Direct cash infusions and financial bailouts to support Vanessa's struggling fashion ventures, exactly $12,000. He dramatically snapped the manila folder shut. The grand total? $364,200. Give or take some change. The silence that followed was completely deafening. Aunt Eleanor aggressively stepped out of the crowd to stand beside her father. Just to provide some critical context for everyone in the room, she announced loudly, "That final number is significantly more cash than most average citizens earn in 7 years of backbreaking full-time labor." Myra generated this capital while simultaneously surviving a grueling medical residency and raising infant twins entirely on her own. She happily offered to help us. My mother's voice violently cracked under the pressure. "We never, ever forced her to do it." "Nobody in this room is accusing you of physical extortion," Grandpa shot back. "But I am incredibly curious about one detail. Over the course of 8 long years of aggressively leeching off her bank account, exactly how many times did you utter the words, 'Thank you'?" Absolutely zero answer. "How many times did you bother to visit her in the maternity ward after her premature twins were born?" Still nothing but suffocating silence. "How many times did you actively show up to support her when she was drowning?" My mother completely broke down into tears. It wasn't the delicate, highly calculated, theatrical weeping from 5 minutes ago. These were hideous, panicked, hyperventilating sobs. "We genuinely thought she was perfectly fine," my dad desperately pleaded, his voice sounding entirely hollow. "She literally never complained about the arrangement. She always miraculously managed to make things work." "She managed to make it work," Grandpa repeated, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. "Because she was forced to. Because you successfully brainwashed her into believing that her own personal needs held zero value in your household." An older uncle standing near the foyer aggressively shook his head in pure disbelief. "Jesus Christ, Richard. You drained 360 grand out of your own kid, and you had the absolute audacity to stand here and call her a burden." My dad visibly flinched like he had just been physically slapped across the jaw. "But I am not quite finished," Grandpa announced to the stunned crowd. "There is exactly one more piece of evidence this family desperately needs to evaluate." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his smartphone, and carefully adjusted his reading glasses. Exactly 2 months ago, Myra was involved in a catastrophic car collision. It was an incredibly serious incident. She was severely bleeding internally and was actively being rushed into an emergency surgical bay. From the back of a speeding ambulance, she desperately dialed her parents' cell phone. Her infant children were stranded at home with a babysitter whose shift was rapidly expiring. She begged for someone, anyone, to come watch her children for a few hours so she didn't lose them to child services. He paused, his furious blue eyes locking directly onto my terrified parents. This is the exact, verbatim text message she received in response to her begging. It was authored by Helen. I will read it exactly as it was typed. He loudly cleared his throat. "Myra, you have always been such a nuisance and a constant burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. Figure it out yourself." The entire grand living room violently erupted into chaos. "Oh my God," a cousin shrieked in horror. "That is completely psychotic. You are aggressively taking that quote completely out of context." Vanessa desperately screamed over the roar of the crowd. "There is absolutely zero context on this planet," Aunt Eleanor viciously snapped back. "That makes abandoning your bleeding child during a massive medical emergency an acceptable response." "We honestly didn't know it was a life-threatening injury," my dad bellowed, his face turning beet red. "Did you bother to pick up the phone and ask?" Grandpa's booming voice effortlessly cut through the chaotic yelling. "Did you ever attempt to call her back? Did you immediately drive to the hospital to check?" Silence instantly returned to the room. The factual answer, for those in the crowd eagerly wondering, is no, no, and absolutely no. A woman standing near the fireplace, a distant cousin I vaguely recognized, physically backed away from my parents, her face completely twisted in visceral disgust. Several other relatives immediately mirrored her movement, creating a highly visible quarantine zone around my family. My mother was hysterically sobbing into her hands now. I swear to God I didn't mean it to sound like that. I was just feeling highly frustrated with her timing. I didn't think she was actually. You didn't think your youngest daughter might actively bleed to death. Grandpa brutally finished her sentence for her. Simply because you have literally never spent a single second of your life thinking about her at all. He finally turned away from them and addressed the wider audience. I am absolutely not demanding that anyone in this room pass a final moral judgment tonight. I am merely serving you the objective facts of the case. What you ultimately decide to do with this information is entirely up to your own conscience. He slowly turned his head to look at me, his terrifying judicial glare melting into an incredibly soft, deeply loving gaze. Myra, sweetheart, do you have anything you would like to submit to the record? I honestly hadn't planned on giving a speech. My entire strategy was to let Grandpa Thomas handle the heavy lifting, to let the irrefutable financial receipts do all the screaming while I stood quietly in the background and absorbed the sweet vindication. But as I looked around that massive room at my violently sobbing mother, my completely shell-shocked and humiliated father, and the total, rapid collapse of my sister's arrogant facade, I suddenly realized I actually had quite a bit to get off my chest. I gently handed a squirming Lucas over to Aunt Eleanor and took a confident step forward into the center of the room. I absolutely did not come here tonight seeking petty revenge, I announced, my vocal cords remaining remarkably steady. I came here because my grandfather extended an invitation. And because for my entire 34 years on this earth, I have been existing inside a heavily manipulated version of my own family that was entirely fictional. I looked directly at my parents. I lived in a highly curated fantasy where I was designated as the strong child, the highly reliable one, the independent daughter who apparently didn't require an ounce of emotional or financial support. I blindly believed you when you fed me the lie that Vanessa inherently required more resources simply because her chosen industry was more cutthroat. When you repeatedly told me I was tough enough to navigate the world on my own, I foolishly swallowed the lie, and I broke my back trying to be exactly the flawless, low-maintenance daughter you demanded. A single, hot tear finally escaped my eye and tracked slowly down my cheek, but I refused to break eye contact to wipe it away. But that terrifying night in the back of the ambulance, while I was rapidly bleeding out and deeply convinced I was never going to see my babies again, I finally processed the truth. I was never strong to you people. I was just incredibly convenient. I wasn't reliable. I was wildly exploitable. And it became horrifyingly obvious that no matter how much cash I poured into your bank accounts, it was never going to be enough to make you look at me the way you naturally look at her. Several relatives had physically stepped forward, closing the gap to stand closer to me. One of my older aunts gently reached out and rested a highly supportive hand on my forearm. A younger male cousin was aggressively nodding his head, his own eyes brimming with angry tears. My father desperately attempted to speak. Myra, please, I am not finished talking. I shut him down instantly. I do not harbor pure hatred for you, I said softly. But I absolutely cannot continue to participate in this delusion. I am completely finished trying to purchase an unconditional love that should have been handed to me for free. An uncle standing on the far side of the grand foyer angrily turned to my father. How the hell could you sleep at night, Richard? You spent an entire decade comfortably surviving off your daughter's brutal labor, all while actively treating her like a piece of garbage. The entire energy of the room was rapidly turning violently hostile toward them. I could practically feel the heat of the crowd's judgment. So, what is the ultimate endgame here? My dad yelled, his voice cracking with pure, cornered desperation. You have successfully humiliated us in front of the entire bloodline. Are you finally happy? I slowly shook my head. No, Dad. I am absolutely not happy. Not a single second of this nightmare brings me joy. I took a deep, shuddering breath. But I am also not going to apologize for it. Because this was never about seeking humiliation. It was about demanding honesty. For the very first time in 8 years, this family finally knows the objective truth. Not your heavily manipulated PR version. Not Vanessa's fake, glamorous spin. The actual, verified truth. Vanessa desperately tried to launch one final, pathetic counteroffensive. This is entirely ridiculous. You are standing there acting like we are literal monsters. We are your blood. We are your family. And families inherently help each other survive. You are absolutely right. I physically pivoted my body to face her head-on. Healthy families do help each other survive. So, where the hell were you when I was highly pregnant and totally abandoned? Where were you when I was pulling all-nighters raising premature infants while simultaneously trying to pass my medical boards? Where were you when I was bleeding to death on a stretcher? She stared back at me with her mouth slightly open. She had absolutely no comeback. I turned my attention back to my parents for the final blow. From this exact moment forward, I am officially cutting off all financial subsidies. I am not doing this because I am broke, but because financial support within a family structure should be a generous gift, not a highly manipulative, one-way obligation. And it should absolutely flow in both directions among people who genuinely care about each other's survival. My mother desperately reached her trembling hands out toward me. Myra, I am begging you, please. I am not declaring that you are permanently cut out of my life forever, I continued, ignoring her tears. But I absolutely require massive, uninterrupted space. Real space. Not 3 weeks of highly manipulative guilt-tripping followed by an expectation that the gravy train will turn back on. I need you to sit in silence and actively process the horrific damage you have inflicted on my life. And if, somewhere down the line, you find the capacity to genuinely acknowledge it, and I mean really acknowledge it, then perhaps we can slowly attempt to rebuild a completely different dynamic. I walked over and gently took Lucas back from Aunt Eleanor's arms. But trust me, I am absolutely not holding my breath waiting for that miracle to occur. As I turned to gather my things, a great aunt I hadn't spoken to in a decade slowly approached me, warmly wrapping her weathered hands around my free wrist. I am so incredibly sorry, my sweet girl, she whispered, her eyes full of sorrow. We honestly had absolutely no idea. For all these years, they painted a picture that you were the child who had it the easiest. I know, I replied softly, offering her a tired smile. Everyone fell for it. That was exactly how the illusion was designed to operate. All right, I want to quickly check in with you guys again. That highly intense moment when I finally forced those words out into the universe, when I aggressively chose my own peace for the very first time in my life, did that deeply resonate with your soul? I know that so many of us have been heavily indoctrinated with the toxic belief that family automatically demands limitless sacrifice, regardless of the abuse. But here is the objective reality. Enforcing a boundary is not an act of betrayal. Refusing to be used is not an act of selfishness. Please type the word boundaries down in the comments if you stand by this logic. And if you know someone who is currently drowning and desperately needs to hear this specific story, please hit the share button and send it to them. Now, let's explore exactly what happened in the explosive aftermath. My parents abruptly fled the birthday party shortly after my speech concluded. Absolutely nobody stepped in their path to stop them. Nobody offered a warm goodbye. My dad practically had to carry my mom out to the driveway while she violently sobbed into his suit jacket. Vanessa slinked out right behind them, keeping her chin glued to her chest, absolutely terrified to make eye contact with a single relative. The heavy silence they left behind in the grand foyer was palpable, but it wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It felt infinitely more like the incredibly peaceful, cleansing quiet that immediately follows a devastating hurricane. In the weeks that rapidly followed the party, the social fallout was absolute carnage. My cell phone practically vibrated off my nightstand with incoming messages from extended relatives. Distant cousins I hadn't interacted with since high school were desperately reaching out to offer sincere apologies. Aunts and uncles who had blindly consumed my parents' carefully crafted mythology of the flawless Carver family were aggressively reevaluating decades of interactions. I honestly always assumed you were just the stubborn, difficult child, my older cousin Rachel texted me late one night. Vanessa constantly made it sound like you violently pulled away from the family out of pure, unwarranted jealousy. I am so incredibly sick to my stomach that I actually believed her lies. The toxic Carver family group chat, the exact digital thread where I had received that devastating text message, went entirely dormant for about 3 days. And then, it was permanently deleted by the admin. But far more significantly, My parents suddenly found themselves entirely blacklisted from the extended family's social calendar. When my cousin Michael hosted a massive backyard barbecue for his 40th birthday 3 weeks later, my parents did not receive an invitation. When Aunt Eleanor hosted her highly anticipated annual Easter brunch, their names were mysteriously scrubbed from the guest list. Nobody in the family issued a dramatic, formal declaration of war. Nobody demanded that people pick a definitive side. The extended family simply, quietly decided that my parents were no longer welcome in their homes. My mother actually attempted to call me from a totally unrecognized phone number about 2 weeks after the explosive party. I instantly sent the call straight to voicemail. "Myra, I am begging you, please pick up the phone. We desperately need to hash this out. This entire situation has been blown wildly out of proportion by your grandfather. Your father is completely devastated by the rumors. I am physically sick over this. Cannot we just apologize and move past this nightmare?" I sat and listened to the recording exactly once, and then I permanently deleted the audio file. Forgiveness is not a magical reset button that instantly erases all consequences. I fully understood that reality now. Forgiveness is an emotional release valve for the victim, not a get-out-of-jail-free card for the abuser. And I was absolutely not ready to release them from their consequences yet. But the severe financial consequences? Those dominoes were just beginning to fall. Exactly 3 months following Grandpa's party, I received a highly informative phone call from Aunt Eleanor. "They're officially liquidating the estate," she announced without any preamble. I slowly set my coffee mug down on the kitchen counter. "Wait, what? You mean my parents? They formally placed the house on the market late last week. The word on the family grapevine is that they completely failed to keep up with the monthly mortgage invoices without your massive cash infusions." I genuinely thought I was going to feel a massive rush of complex emotions. I thought I might feel deep satisfaction, glorious vindication, or perhaps a lingering, toxic pang of daughterly guilt. Instead, I just felt incredibly, wonderfully tired. "Where exactly are they going to live?" I asked. "Your Uncle Frank is allowing them to temporarily occupy the small guest house on his property." Eleanor paused, letting out a dry chuckle. However, he made it abundantly clear that the living arrangement is highly conditional. They are mandated to secure full-time employment. Real, actual, clock-punching jobs. Not just sitting around waiting for a magical benefactor to bail them out of debt. Jobs. The concept was almost hilarious. My parents hadn't participated in the full-time labor force in over a decade. My dad had gleefully accepted an early retirement package at the age of 55. My mom had never held a career outside of the household. They had been entirely sustaining their upper-middle-class fantasy lifestyle exclusively using my grueling hospital paychecks, and they were so incredibly arrogant they hadn't even realized how dangerously dependent they had become. "What about the golden child?" I asked. "Cannot Vanessa swoop in and financially rescue them?" Eleanor let out a laugh that was entirely devoid of kindness. "Vanessa has been completely drowning in her own karma ever since her divorce." The explosive details regarding the birthday party rapidly leaked out. Somebody in our extended family has very close ties to her specific sector of the fashion industry. The rumor mill destroyed her credibility, and she officially lost a massive, highly lucrative design contract. Eleanor paused for dramatic effect. "The last reliable update I heard is that she is currently picking up part-time shifts waitressing to cover her rent." I just stood there, staring quietly out my kitchen window, watching Lily and Lucas happily chase each other around the fenced-in backyard. "I genuinely do not want them to suffer, Aunt Eleanor," I murmured softly. "I know you don't, my sweet girl. And that is exactly why you are an inherently good human being." Eleanor's voice softened considerably. "But you have to realize they completely avoided suffering for 8 long years solely because you were absorbing all of their pain for them. Because you acted as their shield, they absolutely refused to grow. They refused to learn basic responsibility. You pulling your financial support wasn't an act of cruelty. It was a wildly necessary reality check." She was completely correct. Deep in my bones, I knew she was right. Later that exact evening, I finally sat down at my laptop and officially restructured my monthly budget. The $3,200 chunk of cash I used to blindly funnel into my parents' bank accounts was immediately redirected into a high-yield college savings fund specifically designated for the twins. When they eventually grew up, they would absolutely never have to lose sleep stressing over predatory student loans. They would never be forced to carry the agonizing, suffocating burden of an older generation's financial failures the way I had. That specific financial pivot felt like the ultimate form of cosmic justice. The phone call arrived late on a Tuesday evening, exactly 6 months after Grandpa's explosive birthday party. I was in the middle of tucking the twins into their beds when my cell phone illuminated on the nightstand, flashing an entirely unfamiliar number. Normally, I would immediately send it to voicemail, but some bizarre, gut intuition compelled me to swipe accept. Myra. It was Vanessa. Her voice sounded entirely different, tiny, incredibly fragile, and completely stripped of the arrogant, polished confidence that had fundamentally defined her entire personality since childhood. Vanessa, I replied cautiously. Please, I am begging you, do not hang up the phone. She took a massive, violently shaky breath. I know for an absolute fact that I do not deserve a single second of your time, but I desperately need to say something to you. I slowly sat down on the very edge of my mattress. Okay, I am listening. I am so incredibly sorry. The words tumbled out of her mouth, heavily fractured by tears. I am just so overwhelmingly sorry for absolutely everything. For the horrific, cruel way I treated you. For the vile things I said behind your back. For aggressively laughing at that text message when you were. Her voice completely broke down into heavy sobs. When you were actively dying in an ambulance, I sent a laughing emoji. What kind of repulsive psychopath does something like that? I sat in silence. I just waited for her to process her own guilt. I genuinely didn't know the truth, she continued, frantically trying to explain. About the insane amount of money, I mean. Not the full extent of it. I was well aware that Mom and Dad were financially struggling behind closed doors, but I honestly assumed they were somehow magically managing it on their own. I had absolutely no idea it was you funding our entire reality. For 8 long years. Myra, how on earth was I so incredibly blind? Did you ever bother to stop and ask them how they were affording it? Dead silence on the line. No, she finally whispered, the shame evident in her tone. I didn't ask a single question, because I actively chose not to know the answer. I absolutely loved being the undisputed favorite child. I loved the fact that absolutely everything in life was handed to me on a silver platter. She let out a dark, highly bitter laugh. Well, absolutely nothing is being handed to me easily anymore. I heard the news about your design contract falling through. Yeah, it turns out that your basic human reputation actually matters quite a bit in this specific industry. It is wildly funny how the universe balances the scales, isn't it? We both sat in heavy, lingering silence for a very long moment. I am absolutely not calling to beg you for a cash bailout, she finally stated, her voice sounding incredibly exhausted. And I am not even asking you for your forgiveness right now. I just desperately wanted you to know that my eyes are finally open. What I allowed myself to become, the horrific things Mom and Dad did to you. I finally see all of it clearly. I took a deep, stabilizing breath. Then you need to start your journey from that exact realization. You need to learn how to stand entirely on your own 2 feet. You need to actively choose to be a better human being. Yeah, her voice was thick and congested with tears. I am really, truly trying. Good. I gently pressed the end call button. And for the very first time in my entire existence, I felt a tiny, fragile spark of genuine hope for her. Exactly 6 months following that surprising phone call, which marked the official 1-year anniversary of the catastrophic car accident that altered my entire timeline, I stood quietly in my brand new apartment, peacefully watching the golden sunset filter through the living room windows. It wasn't a massive, sprawling luxury estate. It was a modest 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit featuring a tiny galley kitchen. But it was located exactly 5 minutes away from my hospital. It sat perfectly within a highly rated public school district, and most crucially of all, it was entirely, undeniably mine. There were 0 monthly mortgage subsidies being siphoned off to parents who completely lacked appreciation for my labor. There were zero health insurance premiums being paid on behalf of people who casually referred to me as a heavy burden. My financial responsibilities were incredibly simple: my rent, my basic utilities, and a rapidly compounding college savings account for my children. Lily and Lucas were currently spending the entire afternoon over at Grandpa Thomas's massive estate. He had organically transitioned into a permanent, highly active fixture in our daily lives over the course of the past year. Every single Sunday afternoon, he would arrive to whisk them away on grand adventures, trips to the local zoo, long walks through the botanical park, and massive ice cream sundaes that I politely pretended to have no knowledge of. "You are raising two incredibly good kids," he told me privately during one of our visits. "You are doing it exactly right." Coming from a man of his caliber, that specific validation meant absolutely everything to my soul. Aunt Eleanor had seamlessly evolved into vastly more than just a biological relative. She had become one of my closest, most trusted confidants. We maintained a strict schedule of grabbing dinner together twice a month. She had been my absolute rock, expertly guiding me through the messy, emotional minefield of setting boundaries, processing my trauma, and finally learning how to unapologetically prioritize my own mental health. "Do you want to know what I admire the most about you?" she casually asked me over pasta recently. "You miraculously didn't allow yourself to become consumed by toxic bitterness. A massive majority of people would have let this trauma turn them evil. And frankly, you had absolutely every single right to be angry at the world. What exactly would be the point of that?" I had replied with a soft smile. "Harboring toxic bitterness is exactly like eagerly drinking a vial of poison and sitting around expecting the other person to drop dead." As for my actual parents, we had not exchanged a single spoken word since the night of the birthday party. But I was kept loosely informed via the family grapevine that they were still miserably cohabitating inside Uncle Frank's cramped guest house. My dad had been forced to accept a humiliating part-time position working the cash register at a local hardware store. My mom was currently scrambling to do basic bookkeeping for a small community church just to afford groceries. They certainly weren't thriving in their new reality, but they were technically surviving. Some quiet evenings, I would briefly wonder if they ever stopped to think about me. I wondered if they genuinely missed my presence, or if they suffered from any lingering regrets regarding how they destroyed our family. But I quickly realized that those specific questions were absolutely not my responsibility to answer anymore. I had spent 34 grueling years breaking my spine carrying their dead weight. It was finally time for me to permanently set the burden down. If you have actually stuck with me until the very end of this lengthy video, I want to offer you a final thought before I sign off. I am absolutely not dispensing professional advice. I am in no way qualified to dictate how anyone else should navigate their own complex existence. But I do want to share a profound realization that I was forced to learn the absolute hardest way possible. For the first 34 years of my life, I genuinely, deeply believed that love was a transactional commodity that could eventually be earned. I foolishly operated under the delusion that if I just generously gave enough of myself, if I sacrificed enough of my own happiness, and if I demanded absolutely nothing in return, eventually the people who were biologically mandated to love me would magically wake up and recognize my inherent value. I was completely, utterly wrong. Genuine love is absolutely not a financial transaction. It is not a shiny reward granted to you for being a useful or convenient human being. And no astronomical amount of money, exhausting time, or draining emotional energy can successfully purchase something that should have been freely, unconditionally offered to you from the very beginning. The beautiful, chosen family that I am surrounded by today, Grandpa Thomas, Aunt Eleanor, and incredibly loyal friends like Marcus, who immediately showed up to the trenches when my own flesh and blood completely abandoned me. They did not choose to love me because of the capital or resources I could eagerly provide for them. They chose to love me simply because of the person that I am. That is the monumental difference. And it horrifyingly took me almost bleeding to death on a cold operating table to finally comprehend it. I honestly have no idea what the future holds regarding my parents. Perhaps a decade from now, they will experience a miraculous transformation. Perhaps they will finally reach out to me armed with profound, genuine remorse, totally prepared to do the agonizing work required to rebuild something authentic from the ashes. If that highly unlikely day ever actually arrives, I will carefully consider offering them an audience. But I am absolutely not going to sit around waiting for it to happen. I refuse to actively shape the trajectory of my one precious life around the desperate hope for a miracle that may never materialize. My life belongs entirely to me now. My vital energy, my financial resources, my unconditional love, it is all fiercely protected. And if the deeply toxic people who raised you attempt to label your basic self-respect as a vicious act of betrayal, then perhaps they never actually deserved a single ounce of your blind loyalty in the very first place. To absolutely anyone out there who is currently breaking their back carrying a massive, suffocating weight that was never actually yours to bear in the first place, it is perfectly okay to set it down. It is perfectly okay to aggressively choose your own peace. You are not a selfish person. You are not a wildly ungrateful child. You are absolutely not a burden. You are finally beautifully free. Thank you so incredibly much for staying with me through the entirety of this highly emotional journey. If this specific story deeply resonated with your soul, please do me a massive favor and hit that like button and ensure you are subscribed to the channel. It truly means the absolute world to me. I desperately want to hear from your perspective. Have you ever been forced to draw a massive, terrifying boundary with a highly toxic family member? How did taking that terrifying step completely alter the trajectory of your life? Please drop your raw thoughts and experiences down in the comments section below. I read every single one of them. And if you are craving more intense, real-life stories exactly like this one, stories entirely focused on bravely standing up for yourself, aggressively finding your inner voice, and escaping toxic manipulation, please go check out the recommended video linked down in the description box. I promise you, you are going to absolutely love it. Until next time, please ensure you actively take care of yourself, because you absolutely deserve it.